Okay. Today is Wednesday, November 11th, 2020, and our session facilitators are Jennifer Klein and Jim Berger. Welcome. I'll be the tech. I'm Daryl Cooperstock. I'll be the tech host for tonight, and Shoshana Zaks, I guess, will be the program host introducing our presenters. Tonight's session is being recorded, and it'll be posted at a later time on the BEKI website. And you can go there anytime to see some of the recordings from all of the, not all, but most of the Wednesday and Thursday night programs that we've had. They're really varied and quite interesting. I don't think Jennifer or Jim, you're sharing your screens tonight, correct?
No.
Yeah.
Okay. You're not even sharing one screen with each other.
Right. No, we had a theoretical ambition to do that, but
yeah, that's the way it is with a lot of ambition. Okay. However, when I get the cue, and you also, from Jennifer and Jim, we will be breaking out into breakout rooms later to have smaller group discussions, maybe about 6 people per group, something like that. You don't have to do anything. I'll take care of it from this end. And basically, the division of these breakout rooms are going to be random. So please understand that we're not going to divide up 25, 30 people one by one, okay? It'll be a great way to meet new people. I will ask people to remain muted during our larger group discussions. And then when you go to the breakout rooms, try to remember to unmute yourself. With 6 people, I think it'll be a freer discussion if you guys are all unmuted at that point. The breakout group will be about 20 minutes. You will get a time warning that there's about a minute or 30 seconds left, at which time all the rooms will close and everybody will be back in the main session. Our presentation this evening, Jim and Jennifer, do you want to take questions as you go or wait till the end to kind of do that?
Well, I was gonna, here is the format that I wanted to propose, or Jim?
Propose it. In fact, don't just propose it, we're gonna do it.
Okay.
We have a plan.
Okay.
So here's how we wanted to proceed. Thank you everybody for joining us. Hopefully everybody's seen the film, since really it is really oriented towards discussing that. But we want to start with just an introduction. Jim will just give us some thoughts on James Baldwin and help us understand just, where James Baldwin fits in as an intellectual, as a witness, as he sees it as an activist. I will offer some comments. Jim wanted to ask just an open question first about your responses to the film. And then we will offer some specific topics or questions for the breakout rooms. So that'll be about 20 minutes. We will then go to the smaller breakout groups where you can, really get into the subjects that were raised in the film. And then after the 20 minutes of small group discussion, we'll come back to the larger group and share what you discussed and see what our larger takeaway points are. So,
Okay.
Shoshana, I don't think we need a formal introduction. I'm Jennifer Klein. I'm, historian of 20th century U.S. history.
You can just say if this it's your pleasure and privilege, and we'll get right into it. So yeah, James Baldwin was an African-American writer who was born in 1924 in Harlem, New York, died in 1987. He was the author of 6 novels, a bunch of books of essays, a bunch of short stories, a fairly, pretty prolific writer. And I think, as the film made very clear, very much a kind of a public intellectual during his lifetime. He lived a good deal of his life in Paris and then came back, as the film indicates, that he felt the need to come back. It's his reputation, when I was in college and grad school, James Baldwin, everyone knew James, Go Tell in the Mountain, Notes of a Native Son, everyone knew James Baldwin, right? But he wasn't considered, he wasn't Richard Wright. Right.
Jim.
He wasn't, he was like big, but he wasn't that big. But it's interesting, and just in the last few years, I've been noticing very much that James Baldwin kind of is the guy. James Baldwin is sort of, I don't know, the Black writer from that period who seems to be speaking to our moment in a way that perhaps we didn't. Masculinity was a different kind of masculinity than one would see, say, in Richard Wright or Ellison or other Black writers. And so that might have a compelling voice. Oh, I was going to say, there's actually a course at Yale this semester, a single author course, James Baldwin. That's it. He's the author. So that, that's certainly, I think, saying something.
Usually
about
that's
this,
only
real
Shakespeare
revival of interest. That's right, Shakespeare and Chaucer, exactly right. So, this film, I don't know, I found it so compelling. I kept having to pause it because I felt like I had to write down everything. Because, all the text of the film is his writing. And of course, his being there, his figure on television. So anyway, that's just, the briefest of backgrounds, because I really want us to be able to get into the meat of the film. And so,
okay, I'm going to give my introductory. Yes. Okay. So my introductory note here is, we chose a discussion of this film so that we could talk about the present. So how is it that we find ourselves watching a film that is about the past, that is about somebody who is no longer alive, so that we could think about what our roles in the present are, what are going to be the ways in which we should intervene in the social demands and the urgency of what's happening today. And so, hopefully you kind of picked up on when James Baldwin says in the film, history is not the past, it's the present. We carry our history with us. The past is what the present is made of. And one of my colleagues, Matt Jacobson, in recently doing a book of photography, photos around the country, wrote, "Our restless, impatient, amnesia-addled culture encourage us to think that history is something that has been left irretrievably behind at varying degrees of distance, depending on the number of years gone by. I began to see the presence of the past, though, in a new way, in layers like geological formations that were nowhere behind me, but beneath and around me." So hopefully this discussion compels us, what is the past that has produced our present? And finding it is not to say control the narrative, but rather as a starting point for self-understanding, for understanding across differential experiences, a starting point for discussion, and to break through our silence and our standing on the margins. So, our economic, our social, cultural, and political history has long rested, as we saw in this film, on racial debasement, on subjugation, on humiliation. And yet when we think of ourselves collectively, we think in terms of benevolence. the US and other Western nations, we heard Baldwin reflect on, exist within a comfortable lie of pretended humanism. It helps prop up American blindness that pretends that no reality presents, or that, there isn't a reality that presents real reasons for people to be bitter. It props up allowing moral apathy in the face of true cruelty. And Baldwin professes that he's terrified at that moral apathy. Sure, any individual can say, I'm not racist, but the problem is apathy and ignorance kind of overrides that on a social level for Baldwin. You don't know because too many Americans don't want to know. Thus, we have a pop culture that constructs fantasies of reconciliation. So I think I'll stop there. And Jim wanted to just kind of open a general question, and then we'll offer some more specific topics and questions for the breakout groups. Jim? Yeah,
I hope you, at least most of you, got a chance to see this movie, and I guess I just, I'm like to just sort of open up the floor to see just kind of how did it hit you? What effect did it have on you? And maybe if you can think of, well, why did it have that effect? What are some of the stuff that it really grabbed you about the movie? I guess that's the question. And I guess just unmute yourself.
Just unmute yourself and wave so we know who's going to be talking.
Oh,
Sarah Berry.
Yeah, Sarah.
Well, one thing that struck me was how much has changed and how much hasn't changed. How much it's the same problem, and yet at the same time, for instance, so we see he was showing the Ferguson riots, but at the same time we have the 2008 Obama inauguration. He's walking down the street, but some of his Secret Service people are Black, which would never have happened in the 60s. I don't know, you probably only maybe starting to get it in the late 70s. So there's some things that have changed and some things that are gone absolutely nowhere. I'm just sort of, I had, I grew up with all of this stuff, so.
Yeah, it's very, you see, and this was before George Floyd, but there is one striking image of a policeman with his knee on someone's neck. Very amazing. John Wise?
Yeah, that should have been Ferguson. Yeah.
Right.
That one with when he was on this woman's neck. That looks,
you couldn't breathe.
That looks like, that one was the 60s, right?
Yeah, it was Birmingham
63.
John.
John.
John Weiser. Yeah.
I found Baldwin to be very insightful, and I had expected someone who was more enraged, but what I found was someone who had sort of come through the other end of rage and was now offering insight. And for me, the most interesting and difficult question he asked was the very end. The last thing is where he says, I'm a human. I'm a man. I'm not a Negro. You made me a Negro. And what is it about the US culture that requires that you make people into Negroes? And that to me was just such an insightful question and such a powerful way of approaching it that I keep thinking about it.
Ruth, and then
Isaiah. Yeah.
As a follow-up to what John just said, Baldwin said, you don't have to see me, I have to see you. I have to understand you, but you don't have to understand me. Mm-hmm. So that's a follow-up. And he also made this remark, which I didn't understand, really. He said, I have to be an optimist, because to be I'm sort of pessimistic. He said to be a pessimist is to be academic. I don't understand that. I want someone to explain it. To be a pessimist is an academic position. Could someone explain it?
Yeah.
I can't explain that.
Later, but yes, go ahead. Sorry. Actually, Daryl, can you take the questions? And I think that might be easier.
Okay, sure.
I mean,
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
Great.
Okay, Isaiah is next.
Yeah, I was just going to, I mean, John said some of what I was going to say. I think Baldwin amazingly says in very few words in various places, he cuts to the core of whatever he's talking about, unbelievably to my mind. He says things, you know, and he says outrageous and audacious things to a certain extent with fewer words than so many people. I mean, he's economical with his words. He's you know, I could listen to him talk forever. He's just unbelievable. I love listening to him. I've read some things by him, and I've seen parts of this movie before, and we watched it again this afternoon. So it's a great piece, and you know, it was made only a few years ago, and reflects a little bit of our current era and makes us more aware, made me feel more aware of the craziness of our social system in the United States. Enough said.
Thank you. Does somebody else have a question?
Yes, we'll take a comment from Max, and then we should probably set up the, you know, talking issues for the breakout rooms. Max?
Yeah, this is related to what Isaiah was saying and what some other folks have mentioned. But one of the things that really hit home for me while watching the film, and also is very much present in Baldwin's other work, but I think was poignantly stated at several points in the film, is how much Baldwin sought to and actually did transcend a lot of different sorts of factionalism, both within civil rights movements and within society. And of course, part of that is because he didn't quite fit in any box, right? But part is also, I think, because he saw clearly.
Oops, we lost your volume, Max.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you said he saw clearly something.
Right. Yeah, saw clearly kind of ways that we can get in the way of change, and and that's the case. I think both when Baldwin is looking at especially white America, and also sometimes Black America, but I can't comment as much on the latter, but certainly, I mean, for us, many of us who are trying to think about how to be allies, I think that Baldwin's thoughts, as expressed in this film, are really useful for thinking through a lot of those issues and kind of what kinds of movements we're going to support it and how, and the importance of trying to make change, though.
And I think also asking us to try to see clearly, to see through the things that are fantasies, that are projections. So, for example, you know, the films like the film with Sidney Poitier and
Tony Curtis.
Tony Curtis.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Who came for dinner?
No, the one where they're escaping from prison.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Where they're, they're chained as prisoners. And the idea that Sidney Poitier would, like, the Black guy would jump off the train, you know, to be there with Tony Curtis and comfort him and everything. And that, you know, this enables the white audience to feel like, see, you know, everything is reconcilable, you know, we're good. We can wrap everything in benevolence. And, you know, that he's asking us to try to, like, pierce through our culture, pierce through the projections. So in thinking about the breakout groups, in what way has he says, you know, white been both a metaphor for power and a system of power? what is the reality that we need to see if we're going to generate a new national identity in which we need each other. And then on the question of policing, which Sarah Berry brought up, and really is one of the compelling elements to come through in this film. I mean, we see 6 or 7 decades worth of policing in this film. The level of hostility and aggressiveness is breathtaking. And as we said, the image of the police officer with his knee in the neck of a Black person in Birmingham in '63 is particularly chilling, of course. So what do we see about racial ideology and policing, about public space, citizenship, and policing? Does policing seem to have changed? And then the question that Baldwin really puts to us is, what do we want the future of our nation to be? When Dick Cavett asks Baldwin, but don't you think lives are getting better for Black folks? And don't you feel like there's been progress for your people? And, Baldwin says, well, the question is not what I individually perceive or whether I personally alter my optimism, hope register. The question is, what's going to happen to our country? How are we going to change the future trajectory of our country? So, so those are some of the questions I'll put on the table. And Jim, do you want to add some to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, these are just sort of suggested things, to just kind of topics. They're not like questions you got to answer. But yeah, the question of whiteness comes up so much. What is it with white people? That he asks, why do white people act the way they do? What kind of moral apathy? What is going on? And then, you have these juxtapositions of, these various behaviors, and what is it that white people need in Black people? And that's the thing. What is this fantasy of Blackness which arouses this bizarreness? And where do Jews fit in, right? Because we're white people, sort of, at least most of, here, more or less. What does that add to the mix? To what degree does that shoe fit, or what's the size of our shoe in that sense? Martin Luther King, in one of his bits in the film, says Black people, Negroes, don't just have a right to be free, they have a duty to be free. What does that mean? I don't know. And of course, I guess, just so we can get down to it, the story of the Negro in America is the story of America. The story of the Negro in America is the story of America, and it's not a pretty story. Oh, and actually, getting back to something John said, I believe at the end of the film, James Baldwin didn't say, I am not a Negro. He said, I am not another word that starts with N. I believe that was what he was saying, if I'm not mistaken. So that category, that's the category, I think, which is the invention. Anyway, okay. Any questions on procedure or on anything before Daryl throws us to the winds?
I just want to add to Jim's thing about Jews and where we fit as Jews, because again, this notion that whites want redemption and forgiveness, but without having to do the work, without, right? Like, we want to be forgiven for some past racial injustice that is in the past, that can be left in the past. So
right. Forgiveness without atonement, I think is sort of the category.
Yeah. So let's go ahead.
There's a couple of hands up. Let's get them quickly. John?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm a little, you read off about 6 or 7 questions, which and do you want us, like, what do you want us to get into the group? We have these 6 or 7 questions mentioned, like, what do you want us to do?
You
get into the group.
Yes.
and have a moment of Quaker-like silence, and then whatever comes to you will come to you.
Your group can decide what you would
okay?
like to discuss.
You want us to report out anything when we're done?
Yes, when we then we come back, then we'll be in different places. I mean, then we'll have.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome back, everybody. Looks like we may have lost one person, but otherwise, I hope everything went well.
We solved the world problems.
Thank God.
But just solve the damn election. Okay. So if anybody wants to tell us about something really compelling or illuminating that came out of your small group discussion, that would be a nice place to start.
Maybe you should start with breakout room 1 and go in order. That would help, I suppose. No?
Does anybody happen to know their numbers?
Sure, that's right. So many shy people. Yeah, breakout room. Who was in breakout room 1?
I think.
Do you remember what number was? I
Oh
don't
yeah.
remember what number mine was.
We were, I think.
I think it was Lana, right? Was that ours? Lana and Martin and Max and.
Well, if it wasn't, go ahead anyway.
Okay, go.
Yeah, I think you guys are elected. So.
Somebody have anything to say?
Max, were you in breakout room 1? What was the main discussion? I mean, we stumbled too. We were in breakout room 2, but we're asking the young people to speak up for a change. You have a
Young people are muted.
Well,
I think Martin was going to say something, and then I'll say something after.
Okay.
Or Lana.
I know we spoke a lot about the police, and but not just the police, the whole society and who's to blame for everything. Lana was bringing up a good point about how you only understand if you actually experience the reverse. Lana was about to tell a story about how when I was working in a so-called...
Can you speak up a little, Martin?
Oh, sorry. Well, I don't know if you want to hear stories, but Lana was going to bring up the fact that you only really understand how a Black person feels if you're in the reverse situation, if you're in their shoes. She did experience that when I was working in a non-white area in South Africa, and she came to visit me and walked through the shopping center. She was the only white person, and they started calling out to her, and she started feeling uncomfortable.
I wasn't until that story, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
A different story.
What's the story?
Yeah, but you know, when you're the target of something, it feels very different. Makes you think about, you know, what's going on.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Max.
Oh yeah, just building on that, we had some really insightful discussion of some personal experiences and thinking about the lived experience of being Black in America, and also about policing practices, kind of about how we got here and what hasn't changed mainly, as well as the kinds of messages Baldwin has about the future and how to think about the future. So it was very helpful. It's a good group.
Yeah. I just realized there's something I just dawned on me when I was talking about watching Dick Cavett and how he was expressing himself on the show. I just realized that television only came to South Africa in about 1974. Our government controlled this and decided it was not good for us to actually see these things. So only at the age of 10 did I see television. And most of the news was what was going on in Lebanon. We didn't see anything locally. We never saw any Black people speaking their mind. So it was very controlled setup.
John?
I know I'm going out of order, but I thought
that's fine.
It would be helpful to get the conversation started. One topic that came up for us, which I found very helpful, was sort of reflecting on when Baldwin says that he has to become an expert in us, but the whites don't have to become an expert in blacks, and sort of thinking about how that is still the case in our workplaces. And one of our members was sort of talking about, sort of watching how when someone who was a woman that was black got upset about something, some injustice, and sort of bring it up, they would get what she called tone policed. Like, we don't do anger here. We don't express anger that way. That they're tamped down because the anger is not permitted. Right. So I just thought it was very helpful to me, sort of insightful as to how actually it works right now.
It also makes me think about like kids who are raised with alcoholic or abusive parents become excellent at reading the room and knowing from very subtle cues when things are going to get bad and scary. And if you're a black person in America, basically you kind of have to live that way all the time, because out there in the world are these irrational, potentially nasty people who have a lot more power than you do. That's a I had never thought about it that way, but that's not any way you would want anybody to have to live.
Jacob, you want to unmute? Thank you.
Yeah. I think kind of picking up on that. We had somebody in our group tell a story about a Yale student who was like a black male Yale student who was late to class a lot, and the professor told him that he should run to get there on time. And the student said, I can't run. A black man running in public, I don't know what'll happen to me. So our conversation kind of got around, well, how do we get over this, that innateness, that innate like fear of a black man running, or a black man shopping in an expensive store that leads him to being watched. So what is the solution to that? And is that societal? Is it in us? Like, do we just need to befriend more black people so we are comfortable? Is that the answer? So our conversation kind of revolves around that in some ways.
Isaiah?
Well, in our breakout group, we were wondering about why Baldwin seems so timely, and we talked about what our experiences were historically. Why, pretty much all of us, our ancestors came to this country at the beginning of the 20th century, and none of them were slaveholders. Although I'm still embarrassed that there were Jews who were very active in the Confederacy, but we're not responsible. But nonetheless, our ancestors who came here did well and didn't have to overcome a racial difference. They could move forward and achieve in the society because we all benefit from white privilege still. There are benefits that accrue to us because we're white, that it's not obvious how that's an advantage, but we don't have to worry about whether people will listen to us. I mean, John put it very well. In any situation, being a white man with an Ivy League education, he can talk to anyone and knows he'll be listened to. But if you're a black man or a black woman in this society, you don't know whether anyone will ever listen to you, and it's hard for you to even break into the conversation sometimes.
Jim.
Yeah, a question occurred to me. What would it, and actually, that I think addresses that issue that.
We lost you.
While we're waiting, I hope everybody gets to see Dave Chappelle on Saturday Night Live.
Yes.
Yeah.
He crystallizes the experience and reminds us about a lot.
While we're waiting for Jim, does somebody else have something they were going to say? Okay. Hopefully he'll be back. Isaiah?
I was going to say something that I didn't say in the breakout room, but it occurred to me. We went to a wedding in Baltimore 2 summers ago, I think it was. And we went to a museum, and there's this museum that was created by this Black financier who was very successful on Wall Street and did extraordinarily well. And one of the things I've heard is that he didn't go to meetings. He sent other people on his staff to go to meetings, mainly white people, in order to get things done. But then the deal got done and he benefited from it, you know. And it's interesting because right after that summer, I ended up with a Black client who wanted me to show up to every meeting to make sure things got done for him. And I thought, well, this is very interesting. It reflects that. And he knew about this guy. He actually knew someone who knew his wife who helped put together the museum. So.
Right.
Is Jim back?
Jim is back.
Jim is back.
Okay.
Back.
Yeah, we knew we wouldn't make it. Sorry, start over. Yeah.
Having that
Tim, we can't hear you.
strike me, and I was going to raise this if we had more time, that there's something prophetic. Are you?
No.
I'm unmuted. Oh.
No, you're not
Can you hear
muted.
me
You're
now?
just breaking up.
You're just breaking up a little bit as you speak.
Oh, never mind then.
Use Jennifer's
No,
microphone.
no, go ahead, because I don't know what you were going to say.
Or move into where Jennifer is.
Why don't you, or you could type it in.
Oh, yeah, type it in the chat. Well,
If you can't hear me, there's no point in saying it.
type it in the chat.
So
So
I
anyway,
heard when you. Oh,
Yeah.
I was
Well,
gonna.
I just
Go
want to
ahead.
make sure that we think in terms also of action and the future. And one issue was as Baldwin talked about, the witness and the participant. And so he says there's a relationship between being a witness and a role for the witness and that of being the participant, but there's also a line between them and they're different roles. And who can be the witness and use that in an effective way, and in what way. And secondly, we were hearing from Lana and Martin about the South African context, and also thinking about reconciliation. But under what does reconciliation mean? What forms does that take? And do you really have to take additional steps to get to reparation? How do we repair the damages of our traumatic history so that we can actually build something new?
I see that Judy Eisenberg typed in, well, along with her cat, but she typed in a comment that in its quality of challenge, yes. I don't know what you were referring to. What were you responding to, Judy?
Responding to internalizing Baldwin's voice as moral imperative, something prophetic.
Oh, to Jim. Okay.
As a prophetic voice.
Got it. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and James Baldwin also said, if we don't heed the warnings, it's the fire next time.
We're in it, baby.
Yeah, right.
This summer.
This time.
This is one of the fires, and we're not out of it yet.
I just think in terms of Jennifer's call to action, that I would encourage us. I mean, I'll tell you what I commit to, which is simply to having conversations about race with people of other races, and not complicated, difficult, but just like, how am I doing? Is there anything I'm doing that's upsetting you? Is there anything that you'd like to have done differently? And sometimes they'll say, no, it's fine. And other times they respond in ways that you didn't expect. And you realize, oh my God, you're right. I didn't notice that. And I could do a little better with that next time. So it's not saving the world, but it is at least sort of starting to check with your peers, like, what am I doing with women or with minorities that either is good, bad, indifferent, whatever. I'm just throwing it out there.
Is there something we can do as a community, like if we're able to have Passover Seders this year, do some sort of invitation at large to Black folks in the community to come to our Seders? Or I don't know, that was just one thought came to mind, but some community effort to, because Jews naturally are going to be segregated. We don't have a lot of Jews in our congregation. And so we don't have the chance as much. I do, with clients sometimes, but we don't have as many non-white relatives or non-white congregants in our community. Or how do we integrate? I mean, I know we had the Deltas come for a speech this year, and we had some services, but how do we integrate? And of course, Abraham's tent, we sit and talk to people, but how do we really become friends with people of another race as a community?
Well, Donna, if I might step out of my role as facilitating here, I spoke to someone and heard some comments in the last month or so, listening to African American intellectuals and activists and others that I know, who really were pointing out that inviting African Americans to speak to us or to facilitate discussions like this, etc., isn't what they're looking for. What they're looking for is for white people to solve their problem of being racists, not for them to tell us
how to do it.
Right. But what I'm saying is you do that by becoming friends, right?
But becoming okay.
I think we as white people have to talk among ourselves and become much more cognizant of our privileges and how it manifests in a number of different ways. Mm-hmm. Because the more we become aware and the more we read about race relations, the more we become aware of how it manifests in a lot of different situations. And that awareness changes the way we approach others and changes the way they react to us, I think. From what I've read, and the woman who wrote White Fragility talked a lot about this, is that Black people want us to solve the problem, to have conversations, to become self-aware of how, we manifest racism. And, I don't think of myself as a racist, but growing up in a racist society, it's in each of us in various ways and comes out in odd ways or manifests in odd ways in our lives or in interactions or in assumptions that people make about us or that we make about others.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Cynthia.
I don't know, Jim. Well, okay, I'll just say quickly. Well, in answer to Donna, I think that we actually do have a lot of opportunities to talk to people of different races. We have to take advantage of the little things, the little conversations with the checkout person in the grocery store or the guy who, wheels you around in the hospital or something, because I think that's where some of our racism actually manifests itself. We have these interactions with people and we don't see them as individuals. And so just wanted to throw that out. Okay.
Yeah, but I feel that, all of us on this that watch the movie and that are in this conversation, I don't think are, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think are the blatant racists who do that. I think the sort of the most racist thing about me is I don't have any Black friends. Sybil Richards is the exception, maybe. I don't have Black people. I have clients that come into the office, which is a part of my house, but I don't have Black people coming in to my home or me going into their homes. We're not equal.
Jim, and then I'm going to respond.
I think Donna's raising a super important point. Leonard Cohen has this great line from Democracy is Coming to the USA the sacred places where the races meet, and those places need to be created. And I mean, you know, back when I was doing a lot of political work and I was really active with New Haven Rising, a lot of, you know, it's mostly Black people. So you know, when you're in a relationship where you have a common purpose and you're working with each other, and you're knocking on doors together, and you're sitting in rooms together making plans, you know, there's no time. I mean, whatever racist stuff you got in the back of your head, which of course you do, it's irrelevant. It just becomes irrelevant. It doesn't even matter because you have an actual working relationship. Or music, you know, that's another thing. Or sports, you know, there's things, you know, things you do.
But also,
so you try to do them.
But the work that you're doing there, it's also getting at the structural problems. Right? I mean, that, you know, we have to think of that. I mean, the examples that Cynthia gave, talk to the cashier, talk to the orderly in the hospital, these are precisely examples of racial hierarchies in our societies. Why is it that Blacks are in the low wage, you know, low end service jobs? That, you know, we should be dealing with it. Think about a hospital. What has been more rigid than the racial occupational hierarchy of a hospital? I mean, you could have walked in there, you know, decades ago, and it was the same racial hierarchy, you know, in the hospital. So I think, you know, what we should be dealing with is, why is it that Black women are still cashiers? You know, so I think the solidarity work needs to be about the structural problems.
So what do you do?
I think your dinner.
Join New Haven Rising. I can put you in touch. I mean, it's, you know, there are those sacred places exist. I don't know.
Rachel and Madeline.
In our group, you know, in the large group, small group, I forgot where, you know, the one thing we know is during Black Lives Matter marches, white and Black people march together. We owe a great debt of gratitude to the Black people who organized those, but that was done wearing masks 6 feet away from one another. But Don is right, the sitting down at a table and having a meal together and forging those kinds of relationships, that's important too. The challenge is not to bring a white person to your table such that that Black person feels so uncomfortable being the one Black person at your table and feels, you know, put on the spot to represent all Black people, and being conscious of the fact that your table is white space, that you're asking that Black person to have to navigate. But you're right, Donna, we have to forge those connections. And I would say all the more so in the Jewish community, because I fear that we've got a substantial number of people of color in this community whose awareness of Jewish people are landlords and people who work for landlords in a very hierarchical, difficult situation. So I think you're right, Donna, to be thinking about after the pandemic, how do we sit down together? And as Jim is pointing out, and what projects do we work on together as colleagues? But I think that people who are saying it's really what we have to look at ourselves, we have to, you know, stop policing Black people as much and police ourselves a bit more and call one another on the small things and the big things. White Fragility is a great book to read. There's this book by Ibram Kendi, Stamped. There's a young adult version of it. It's fine for adults too. It's a short read, it's a powerful read. This film series, these are great films to be watching and to be thoughtful about and talking about. This is important work for the white community.
I'm going to say that I live in a neighborhood.
Madeline was going to be next. I think
Yeah.
Madeline
I was just going, somebody had posed the question, how do we do this, or how do we, and I think the one way to do it is first to become aware. You know, I think we haven't had this awareness, and that's an important part. I mean, we have to become aware that, we have a lot of white privilege, we have white supremacy. It's the underpinnings of all the institutions in the United States and America. And so it's, it's not what we do one time, to have somebody at your table or something. I think it's deeper, a lot deeper than that, and will take a lot more work. But I think awareness is the first place to start. Like this.
I think that Marcia and Rhoda wanted to speak.
I was just going to say that a large part of the difficulty that we have in knowing what to do and knowing, people who are African American is because of the segregation in our society.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to be very lucky to live in Beaver Hills, which is a neighborhood that has been pretty stably integrated ever since I've lived here, which is like 30 years already. And, I have neighbors who are Black and we have, brunches together. We're at each other's houses. We see each other on the street. We talk to each other. We know each other's dogs. But there's still problems in the neighborhood, as you've probably read about in the New Haven Independent. And we have a planning committee and we're trying to figure out a way to deal with these problems. And we're meeting on Zoom and we planned, a young African-American woman has started Fix Up Fridays or Clean Up Fridays, where people help plant flowers in community spaces and clean up areas. We had a porch fest where people would have music, outside on a Sunday afternoon on a, kind of socially distanced, a few things going on at a time, and we could walk around and hear all kinds of ethnic music, including the Chabad community actually participated. And it was right before Rosh Hashanah, and I heard the shofar blow for the first time that way. So I think we're trying to work together and plan together to see how we can overcome some of the problems that we have right in our community. And I'm not sure where we're going to end up, but we're trying.
I like those ideas. I mean, actually, of doing those projects together. They both rehabilitate the neighborhood, and they tie together the neighborhood socially. I would think even doing a community garden together would be an incredible project.
There is one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
there is
one
one
already. I'm just saying for all of us to think about, in some way. These are. And
it's fun. It's fun. We're having a great time. It's a challenge. There are like 100 WhatsApp messages a day that sometimes go back and forth, and it's hard to keep up.
It's terrible. I think Marcia.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that I am going to further the conversation in that direction. There's a wonderful direction of what community actions can be taken. I'm thinking of the sort of the self-study of reevaluating our own lives, and what I saw in the movie pointed to quite a few things to reevaluate in my own life and my own upbringing. I had a pretty white segregated sort of upbringing, though I grew up in the North, in Pennsylvania. I wasn't segregated, like you think of in the movie, but I didn't have, a lot of contacts. I wanted to make two other points. One is that what I saw in the movie of the attacks on Blacks made me think, as a Jew, that if those things had happened to a Jewish person in America, that the Jewish community would have rallied and insisted that something change. And maybe the Black community tried many times before being effective, which I think that, this past summer, we saw a lot of effectiveness, but we didn't, and that sort of leads me to the third point, which is that we are living right now, and the context is different than it was in the 60s. It was horrible to see the segregation and the people marching for segregation. That was horrible. But we're living right now where there are actually white supremacists and fascists who have the top of our government's ear, and it's being promoted, not just allowed. And we can't forget that, even though I'm thrilled that we have a new president coming in, that won't change everything. And in fact, almost half of our population is supporting what we can't stand. And so we just have to keep that in mind, and finding allies across races and across everything is very, very important. But we can't forget the context that we're in and how very dangerous it is.
I agree. I think I'm going to jump in, if that's okay, because it's now 9:15. Jim or Jennifer, do you have any closing comments you'd like to make?
I just in response to Marcia, and also something that Joanne was talking about earlier, because she was in Philadelphia in 1968 at the time that Martin Luther King was assassinated, and teaching in a Black school, and was one of only a handful of white teachers, and even though there were riots, they went back to the school. They felt, that they had to go back, that they had to be there and be, within that community. And I think, in the 60s, what finally came through was the urgency, the moral urgency that this system, the Jim Crow system, they could not live under it one more day. I mean, this is it. This is why people put their bodies on the line, because it made the urgency so clear that this was not tolerable one more day. And I think with what Marcia was saying, I mean, we are in this moment where we have to make clear again the absolute urgency. The Black Lives Matter marches of the summer made that clear, that this is a system of regularized state-sanctioned violence. And now we have roving armed bands of vigilantes that are out there. You might read Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. And so again, I think making the imperative, the moral imperative and its urgency present is there. The second thing I'll say is, I mean, just floating this out there, and I don't know if this would work at all or not, but whether if we were to do a kind of New Haven local truth and reconciliation process, how that might work, how that might begin a process. And then, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, what a great idea. You just came up with that. That's pretty brilliant. I guess the last thing I would just sort of, I think this has been a really good discussion, a really honest discussion. And I think that's really what is called for, real honesty regarding ourselves, regarding our country, regarding our history. And I would just sort of close my own remark with another James Baldwin quote, which is, not everything that can be faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed that cannot be faced.
Yes.
So
that's a great quote. Thank you.
Thank you. If I might have one thing to say, on behalf of the Tikkun Olam Committee, I want to thank Jim and Jennifer for taking on the challenge and the task of doing over time, doing a series of these kinds of programs for us. It's wonderful that we can be engaged. If people have other ideas for ways in which the community can be engaged, please let Shoshana and me know. Maddie and I had a discussion the other day, a long discussion about this, and somebody mentioned doing the work on ourselves. And Maddie had a suggestion for a resource for that. And there are a couple of books that have been mentioned tonight. I think one of the things that we might try to do is, without the promise that it will be the most comprehensive ever created, I think it would be a great idea for us to put together a bibliography and a filmography of the kinds of things that we can start reading and start watching and discussing, even informally among ourselves or just with ourselves, to further this to further this personal movement for ourselves and social movement, which is desperately needed. Thank you, Shoshana.
I want to say thank you quickly and wish everybody a good night. And I just want to let you know, we have Mayor Justin Elicker is going to be speaking next Wednesday evening. He's going to have a little chat with us, although I don't know, he sent a robocall around tonight and he sounded like he was talking really fast. So I suspect he's super busy, but hopefully he'll be able to do what he, be there with us.
And Jennifer can mention her idea to him.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And then the day after Thanksgiving, we're going to be hosting schmooze, basically as a way for people to get together, because we normally would, see each other every now and then, particularly on Kiddush on Saturdays. So it's the idea to bring your lunch, turn on your Zoom, and we're going to have some chit chat and just checking in with one another. And if you have family, adult children visiting, or if you have them not visiting, but if they want to Zoom in and participate, people who we know from BEKI, that's also great. And then you'll be getting the mid-month mailing is coming out. We have a bunch of programs for December, very diverse, all fascinating, exciting, including, kind of related to this, Anthony Mordecai Tzvi Russell is coming back. He's the opera singer who sings Yiddish and Hebrew songs. And he's going to do a program about, he calls it Convergence, where Jewish, Eastern European music and African-American music, where are their common points? And he has, he'll do some performing, but he'll also do some teaching. Sounds really interesting. So you won't want to miss that. That's the 30th of December. And anyway, you'll be getting lots of notices about things. And thank you very much. Thanks, Jim and Jennifer. This was great.
I just want to say the next film we're going to do is Traces of the Trade, in which we look at a white family and white descendants and how they think about what is their complicity in slavery or their relationship to slavery, and debate whether they in fact are connected to this past from 300 years ago and owe a response to it. So we'll kind of flip it and look at it at whites dealing with those connections in the next film.
Great.
Okay.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
All right. Thanks for participating.
Yeah.